Hey, it's Michaela. Hey, it's Michaela. Today I'm going to show you how to make some scrunchies using only scrap fabrics. So you end up with some really cool styles. This one here is a two-tone polka dot and... oh, there's a thread in there. Polka dot and leopard print. So cute. Then there's this one, which is just a colourful fabric, which I didn't have enough of, but I really like this fabric, so I just added in some white. And then this reversible one also really likes fabric, didn't have enough, so I've got a really cool print on this side, white on the other side, and then a tie. So you really don't need too much fabric for these. I went by the rule of 50 centimeters length, and that gives you like a pretty good scrunch. Basically you can do whatever you want to do. It's like however much volume you want or however wide you want it. You can change it up. So this one's kind of thick, this one's a bit thinner, and then this one's got a lot more scrunch because it was a little bit longer. So yeah, I went by the rule of 50 centimeters long, 10 centimeters wide. That gives you enough to overlap with your stitch and also enough seam allowance. So you can either do it on the fold, this one's fold, or you can do it 2 layers. The elastic measurement is basically, it depends on how thick or thin your hair is. So I went by the rule that if it fits around my wrist with a little bit of slack so that you can tie it together, you're good to go. These I can get around my hair 3 times. Yes, that is how thin my hair is. So 3 times. It's not much. If you have thicker hair, make your elastic longer. Really up to you, doesn't matter. But yeah, these fit on my wrist really well. Now I know obviously world's pretty crazy right now, and it's just insane. So I thought I'd do a bit of a lighthearted video, something you can do at home if you're stuck at home and you can't go get supplies. This is all using scraps. I do have a fancy sewing machine and a fancy iron, but you can use just a basic sewing machine. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, and you don't really have to iron it, but I like it. I think it gives it a nicer finish. So let's get into the video. That was so cringy.
So step 1 is to go through your ridiculous scrap pile, or tubs in my case, and choose your scraps that you want to make your scrunchies from. So it doesn't have to be enough in one piece. You basically want enough to make a 50 centimeter by 10 centimeter strip, so you can combine a whole bunch of different fabrics. So these are my choices today. And I'm going to start off with this one. I really like the fabric, but there's not enough. So we just want to cut make it into a piece that is wide enough, and this will be half or 3/4. And then I'm going to do the same with the white. I'm basically going to lay it on top and cut the same width. I'm just laying them on top of each other to make sure that they match, and then you want to give them a good iron because that white one was manky. Now we're going to just sew them together with a straight stitch, right sides together, and iron that flat. You don't have to iron it, but it's nice. Now if you put a pin through the seam, so basically fold the 2 pieces together, pin directly through the seam, you're going to get a perfect finish. And here is where I decided that it was too long, so I cut it to be a total of 50 centimeters. And then sew the right sides together in half. And you can sew over your pins, just be careful. And now we want to flip it right side out. So you just turn it in on itself. You can use a loop turner if you want, but I find if you just pinch it and pull it, you'll be able to flip it. And once we have it right sides together, if you roll the edges where the seam is, like I'm doing here, it'll sit a lot flatter. And look at that. Oh, that seam is great. Now I'm ironing it flat. Again, you don't really have to do this, but I like it. Now check your elastic. You want, this is actually up to you how wide you want it. I did it around my wrist, just so that there'd be enough room. I find that that is the best for my hair. And then cut your length. And now I'm measuring it to check for future reference. Put a safety pin in one end. And then thread it through your loop. Make sure you hold on to the other end so you don't pull it the whole way through. And just scrunch it up until you get the pin on the other side. And then you just want to tie it together really tight and give it a good pull to make sure that it doesn't come undone. And test it on your wrist or your hair, see if you like the length. I decided that the elastic was far too long for me, so I tied it a little bit tighter. Now we're going to fold it inside itself so we'll get a nice seam. So just testing it on myself. Put one in the other one and make sure it's sitting nice and flat with the elastic towards the inner circle. Once it's flat, fold the other edge in and then pin it in place once you're happy. It's a little fiddly, but it's fine. You can hand stitch this if you want. I just find it easier on the machine. So pin it in place. And check both sides to make sure that it's sitting flat. And then we want to stitch that closed. So back stitch. And then sew. And back stitch again at the end. Don't forget to chop off all your loose threads. Bam, we got a scrunchie. So now I'm moving on to my next one. This one was a bit of trial and error, but again, I'm just getting that long strip. I originally did 2 layers on top of each other and then cut it down later, which you will see. So just getting the white fabric the same and checking that they match, laying them on top of each other and cutting off your excess. Again, I like to press it. I think it's just because this white fabric is super crinkly. Now, right sides together, we're going to sew down one side. This one's a bit different to the first one because it's not on a fold. So basically, we're just sewing 2 sides. You can cut this off. I think it's nicer. Now here, the fabric is a little bit off, so I'm just sewing on the colored fabric, and I'm going to trim that later. So just trimming off the excess. And then same thing as before, turn it inside out. And I'm just measuring that 50 centimeter length. I've put a pin here so that I know. And then I'm going to cut that off, but save that piece for later. And I've given it an iron. Now this is the extra piece. I decided instead that I was going to make a tie. So I'm folding it in half, finding the center, putting a pin in there so I know. And then I'm going to just curve off the edges and into a point. So starting in the middle, back stitch. And then going to the edge, we're going to get to the corner and pivot. Pivot! And then secure it off at the end. So just going to do the same for the other side. And now here I kind of did this backwards, so I'm just going to unpick a little bit of the center seam. That's where we're going to flip it inside out. Remember, just chop off your excess and don't forget to trim your corners as well. Now flip it inside out. And if you are going to use scissors to get the point, just make sure you're very careful. So now the opening we have to stitch shut. It's basically just a top stitch. So start at one end and go the whole way through. Now I'm just securing off that last piece that I cut, because if we turn it inside out, it will unravel. So again, I did this a bit backwards. But just stitching it shut so that it doesn't unravel. Now getting the elastic, check again on your wrist. It doesn't have to be your wrist, I just find that's what works for me. Feed it through and tie it in a knot. Now check again, see if you like it in your hair or on your wrist. I'm happy with this one, so we're going to stitch it shut. Now fold in one raw edge and then feed the other edge through. It's a bit fiddly, but once you're happy with it, it's sitting all flat, put a pin in it. And then we're going to stitch it shut. Again, make sure that your elastic is towards the inner circle and sitting flat, so the knot is not where you're sewing. The knot is not where you're sewing, you know what I mean. Make sure that you've caught both sides of the fabric. Now I'm going back to that tie that I made earlier. I'm just giving it a nice little press. And then we're going to feed that through. I tied it over the seam of the scrunchie so you can't see it. And just tie it in one knot and pull it really tight. So cute. Now I'm moving on to my last one. I'm just using two different fabrics. I would recommend using the same type. I chose here a stretch and a non-stretch, which is fine. It's just a bit more fiddly. So measuring out my 50 centimeter length and my width. Now this is a lazy way of cutting. You can just draw a line, but I just eyeball it using the measuring tape as a bit of a guide. And now just checking that I like these two fabrics together, and I definitely do, so we're happy to go ahead. And then I'm just going to stitch the center piece right sides together. And then give it a quick iron. Now here's where you pin the seam together. So if you match them up, put a pin directly through the center of the seam on the front and the back, you'll end up with that really nice finish. And then we stitch right sides together with about a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Careful when sewing over your pins. And then, same as before, we should be pros at this by now. Flip it inside out. And elastic. You know the drill. Now this one, because it's exceptionally long, definitely make sure you hold on to that other edge because you don't want to pull it the whole way through. If you want, you can safety pin it and then tie your knot, check you like it, move all your crap out of the way, and then fold in one raw edge. Just use your fingers to press it flat and then tuck the other edge inside that fold. Make sure you've moved the elastic knot out of the way as well. And then pin it in place, stitch it shut. And another scrunchie. So you can use this method on pretty much any fabric as long as you have that strip. You can make it out of 5 pieces, you can make it out of 1, all sorts of things, add little ties and everything. And that's it. 3 new scrunchies from scraps which would otherwise go to waste. So happy sewing!